Hey beautifuls, got a bit of a hot topic to speak about, which I'm actually really friggin' nervous to speak about. Coaches that go around promoting drug use is unethical, and up until now my life has been a coping mechanism, so no wonder I was so angry and got so triggered about it. I'm so friggin' nervous with what I have to share about everything. And my eyes are a little bit puffy from bawling my friggin' eyes out about this huge realization last night. And then going for a walk this morning, I'm like, oh, you want me to live stream about this? Like now? Like, oh, I see. I see. Right. Just let me like get my head around that for a minute. Whew. All right. As always, I'm going to share this. So let me know when you're jumping on live and where you're from around the world. If you're watching the replay, let me know you're watching the replay. I'm really, really like, giddy. You want me to what? Talk about this? Holy moly, this is pretty deep and vulnerable. This feels like something I would only share in my Trust Intuition support group. So it's kind of big. It's kind of a big deal. It's a big deal. Big deal, all right. All right. Here we go. All right, shared. Just going to bring this up because I need to speak to this as well, which again, I'm pretty nervous about. Okay. How are you guys feeling with these energies? They're pretty like, I'm just like, still coping with it. Still coping with it. Definitely. I've got all these animals out here and kittens and cords and stuff. So if I'm looking around, I'm like, don't touch the cords. Don't touch the cords. Okay. All right. So where do I start with this? Because there's a little bit to this. So there's a little bit to it. And it's definitely like, obviously you guys have, if you've been following me, I've been pretty angry lately and processing some really, really deep stuff. Huge stuff. Massive stuff, right? And I'm just gonna, hang on, I was gonna bring up these comments here because I don't know if it's, just bring this up probably. Maybe I'm just distracting talking about what I want to talk about. This is a really big deal for me. It's really massive and I still crying about it. And I was working on a project last night and I was just like crying amongst it. And I was just like, it's okay, Hannah, it's okay, because what you're working with here is massive and what you're shifting out is massive. And it's not just what I'm shifting out now, it's everything that I'm unraveling from and what I've been through in the past 3 years, let alone like obviously my whole life, right? And this goes pretty deep with what I'm about to share here. So the whole thing with like coaches posting about promoting drug use, I personally feel is unethical. And you know, and it's kind of hit me a few times and I'm like, why do I get triggered about that? What is that about? And for me, it's like a no-brainer. I'm like, you know, there's particular coaches that I see and like they're quite, you know, very huge following and you know, for me, like people are like, oh, it's medicine, Hannah, and it's plant medicine. And, you know, also like marijuana is like a plant and it's a plant medicine. And I'm like, like to start with, right? And this is so important with empaths or sensitive people. And if you're in a relationship or have been in a relationship with somebody who smokes weed, for example, and you don't, or if you don't even have to be in the physical vicinity of them, if you're sensitive enough, you will feel like you're stoned, and this applies to any drug, okay? This applies to any drug. You will feel like you're stoned, you'll feel like you're high, you might smell it or you might taste it in your nose, like I know with my ex, he would get on coke or whatever, and I could taste it in my Like I wasn't even with him, like physically in the vicinity of him, and I'd text him, I'm like, are you on the gear? And he's just like, how did you know? Like, and I'm like, I can freaking taste it in my sinuses. Like it's insane, right? So as an empath, we feel this stuff, right? And can you just sit down, please? Just come and sit down. Just chasing the kittens, and I'm nervous about the cords being knocked over. You know, and so like as a sensitive empath, we can feel it and sense it, right? We're like absorbing it in a way, and we're not even with them. The thing with marijuana, particularly, like every drug has a different, every drug has a different effect and impact on our spiritual body, yeah, on our aura and through the different layers in our aura. Now, just to give you a slight little bit of history, if this is the first time you're listening to me, from the age of 13 to 21, I used to smoke weed every day. And I'm not just talking about a joint here and there. I'm talking about buckets. I'm talking about bongs. I'm talking about like I used to out bucket the boys, for goodness sake. Do you know what I mean? Like every day. Like I used to get my dog, come home from high school, get my dog, go for a walk to my dealer's house, sit there and smoke buckets with the whole crew, and I would out bucket them all. Like, it's what I used to do. Like, you know, and I think this is why I've been processing this whole, like, you know, the coaches and they're promoting the marijuana or whatever, and I'm like, what? Like, it doesn't make logical sense to me, right? And I've been trying to figure this out, and my cry last night helped me unravel a big part of it. So number one, I've had heavy drug use for a long period of time, like, you know, long, not just marijuana. When I hit 16 to 21, that was like hardcore drugs. I used to smoke crack. I didn't ever needle. I'd never used to go into that. I'd never done heroin or anything like that, but I used to smoke ice or crack, whatever you want to call it. I used to have a lot of speed and ecstasy. They were my kind of drugs of choice. So yeah, it's so interesting. So Misty Rose says, I had a few spiritual people absolutely swearing by pot yesterday, saying it helps them with ascension. Oh my God. See, this is the thing I'm going to talk about. This is bullshit. I'm like, what? Right? Like, let me go into this, because I don't like, let me explain I'm like, no, like that. Okay, let me go into it, right? Because Misty said, like, I had a few spiritual people yesterday absolutely swearing by pot, saying it helps them with ascension. It just goes so against my knowing and guides. Yeah, this is the thing, guys. So I've had a heavy drug use, right? Like for a long period of time, 13 to 21, yeah? That was the main, like, every day. That was every day, yeah, every day. Now, when I was 21, that's when I had my spiritual awakening. Then I learned about this stuff, and I, like, probably from about 6 months of a period of time from my actual spiritual awakening, 6 months of like weaning off it, not like, oh, I'm gonna wean off drugs now because like I'm spiritual. Like, no, it was a natural thing. I was like, man, I don't need to take this shit anymore. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, that's where that was from. And so August 2006 was the last time I took recreational drugs. Now, in that point, right, there's so much more to that little point there, but this like whole thing, and I've been seeing coaches, and I'm like, you know, like one of the particular coaches like has had issues with fertility and falling pregnant, and then she's like promoting like marijuana, and I'm like, how can you not put those two things together? Like, for me, it's like I'm like can't you see, like, I don't know, for me, I'm like, how can you not see that connection? Like, you're trying to fall pregnant, you've got fertility issues, but you smoke weed? And it might be like once or every now and again, and I'm like, man, you still smoke it. Like, can't you put those two things together? Like, that doesn't make logical sense to me, right? And there's so many pieces to this, right? Is like that little section. Then there was another, I'm just going to talk about this because this is where this goes into and why I got so triggered about it or whatever. So randomly, this person came up in my feed. I didn't even know I was friends with them. And I loved her post. Like, I loved what she said, right? Because I'm like, that's exactly what I've just stepped out of, right? And this whole thing is like, is really thing here. So Missy says it's lower frequency. Yeah, let me talk about the frequency stuff and ascension, because I fucking hate those stuff. I don't know, I just get so agitated with those words, and I want to change things in my business because of what I learned, and I'm like, man, like, yeah, anyway, don't get me started on that. Let me stay focused for a second. So this woman, I loved her post. She says, women who were addicted to bad boys, who needed saving, sometimes become coaches who attract helpless, needy clients who want a mum, not a coach. And I was like, yeah, I've just stepped out of that, because my burnout and the reason I stopped having one-on-one sessions and why I stopped like everything is because I'm stepping out of this role, right? Even like my clients in the past, they're like, oh, you're like this big, loving, nurturing mother that just wraps me up with so much love. Like they've literally said that to me before. So when I saw her post, I was like, that's pretty much, because I've always been one of the boys, and I've always been out with the bad boys, and I've always hung around the bad boys, and I've always done that. Like that's my history, like in the drug taking days and the whole thing. Like it's a thing, right? She says, check yourself. Are you creating healthy relationships with your clients, or are you unconsciously creating trauma bonds that weaken them and drain you? And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I've like stepped into. That's exactly why I've come to a hold. And I'm like, I can't keep going like this. Like this is where I'm shifting. And then people have turned around and said to me that I'm being dark and nasty because I'm setting these boundaries, which is meaning I'm not being that mother role to them anymore. And so they're cracking it at me and leaving, which is kind of good. But it's just like, man, like I'm not that person to you anymore. And I call it people pleaser role. But when she said the mother stuff, I was like, oh, that makes total sense. And I was like, oh, who is this woman? Like, let me check her. Like, you know, and I'm scrolling through her profile. And then she's like, oh, I don't know, I can't remember exactly. It's like, I just landed a high ticket client while I'm stoned off my head or something like that. And I'm like, oh what? It's like, hang on a sec. Okay, I love those bits, but definitely not those bits. And I just don't resonate with it, right? So in my spiritual journey and stuff, like part of my training as a lightwork practitioner training in level 2 is that we went deep into drugs and what they do on our body, and like through the like aura and the effect, right? So marijuana, for example, you know, when people smoke marijuana and they're like smoking marijuana and they're like, oh, that feels better, and they're high and it's so amazing. And then they come down like the next day or whenever they come down, and it's like, reality, right? And it's like, back to reality, you know, and some people even need it in the morning to get through the day or whatever, right? Now, there's no judgment here, but I'm just sharing what it actually does to your energetic body when you smoke it. Part of that smoking it and then feeling like, oh, that feels better. So in our aura, right, in our energetic body, big bubble around us, right? And in our physical body, we carry trauma. Now, some people call these implants, and I've been wanting to write an angry post about this freaking alien implants and all this sort of shit. And I'm like, man, it's not an implant. It's a bit of trauma that you're picking up. And yes, it's just a label, but I'm like, nobody fucking placed it there. I'm like, that's a bit of trauma that you got stuck in from whatever aspect of your life or your past life. I'm like, it's not an implant. I'm like, let's unpick this trauma. Anyway, part of me talking about this now is that yesterday I wanted to come on and do an angry live stream. I'm like, honey, you can't go on and do another freaking angry live stream, for fuck's sake. Like, what is actually going on here with you? Like, you know, so I've been really diving deep with this. So anyway, so in our aura is these bits of trauma, right? Now, you have to understand that as a tiny child, we were all once a tiny child. And unless we had super amazing conscious parents when we were a tiny child, and most of us who are adults now have come from a generation where that was very like rare. That was like rarer than diamonds, yeah? So when we were going to cry as a child, we were told to stop it, zip it up, I'll belt you if you like, what is that thing, you know, like I'll give you something to cry about, like all those things. You have to understand that not being able to cry creates a trauma in your body. Now, some people might disagree with me with that. I don't really care if you do. I'm understanding from all my training all over my years, and as a healer, this is what it is. If you weren't able to cry, it creates a trauma in your body. Now, there's a different level of trauma of like getting beaten up by, you know, getting bashed by someone and or sexually abused by someone and not being able to cry. Like, yeah, they're different depths, different weights, I want to say, of trauma, but it's still a trauma, okay? If you cannot, like, you know, release those tears in any given moment when anything comes out, yeah, it's created a trauma. It creates like a rock, right? It creates a rock in your body, in your physical body, in your energetic body. If you get belted, like, especially if you get a smack or something as a child, like, how common is that for us in the generation we're in, right? And the older generation, like, we got whipped at school and stuff. Like, what? Like, you know, it was normal. And it's in our bones, right? It literally embodies in our bones, right? So anyway, there's so much I could go into that. But the point here is that when we smoke weed, right? We smoke weed and we're like, got, you know, all the bits of trauma and all the rocks in our aura, in our energy field and in our body. When we smoke weed, what happens is that it separates our sheaths. So in our aura, there's different layers in our aura, and the sheaths separate when we smoke weed. Now, all those bits of trauma also move away, and that's why you feel better. That's why you feel high and light. It's the same thing when you take a lot of different drugs, right? But every different drug has a different aspect of what it does to your brain, to your psyche, and to your energetic body, right? When you separate those sheaths through your aura, you're not there. It's open. Anything can come in when you're high. Yeah, it could be conscious to an extent, but all this energetic stuff is open. I'm like, no thanks. Right? Because anything can come in. That's why I always say the best form of protection is being grounded in your body, because nothing can come in. Like, things can come towards you and you might be like, no thank you, right? But if you're not in your body, if you're not fully housed and connected to all your layers, things can come in, right? And so as an empath, if you're in a relationship with somebody who smokes weed, for example, right, or takes any other drugs, you probably feel high, or like I was showing at the start, right? But if you're a partner of somebody who smokes weed, or a lot of weed, or any drugs, when all their trauma and bits and feelings, unfelt feelings, move away from their body, where do you think they go? Straight onto you. Oh my God, right? And that's why you feel like, whoa, what's happening? Or you might just start crying or whatever it is, because all their stuff has just come onto you, right? Yeah. So yeah, Misty says, yes, I explain it, see it like you leave your body and give space for entities to enter. Yeah, exactly. So you don't necessarily leave your body, but all of your layers of your sheaths like separate away from you. Like, you know, like move away. They're not connected to you anymore. And so there's just all this space. It's like, man, anything could come in that, right? So got a story of Unraveling here. So there's so many different things and drugs and everything like that. And I have done a live stream on that, you know, going into the drugs specifically. So if you want to watch that, just let me know. Or if you need help working through stuff like this, please let me know, because after me going, no, I'm not doing like sessions anymore, and then coming in, you've probably noticed my story, that the reason that I've had to stop that is exactly what this woman, which I loved that post, but then I just didn't like what she was about in total. You know, like women who were addicted to bad boys, who needed saving, sometimes become coaches who attract helpless, needy clients who want a mum and not a coach. Like, you know, and for me, that was what I needed to give in the start, because I know that I'd gone through I want to say spiritual abuse through a mentor relationship in the past. It was just an unhealthy, codependent mentor relationship, and I had to recover from that too. Oh, so intense. But anyway, so my 21-day shifter program is 21 days, unlimited questions and answers. There's 2 psychic readings in there. So you've got voice message, text message from me. You can ask me anything, right? So the link is in the top of this live stream. And you can find it on my page as well, or you can go to realityawareness.com, and if you like scroll down, you can see the Work with Hannah section, and you can find it in there as well. Yes, Samantha says, so glad I've just joined and so glad I did. Extremely interesting. Yes. All right, so I just got all my little notes because I've got a story here of unraveling the depth of where this really stemmed into for me, because when I got to the core of why it triggers me so much to see coaches and stuff like promoting like weed and plant medicine and, oh, it's a medicine, Hannah, like, and I'm like, I don't know, like, it's a drug. It's a drug, whether it's pharmaceutical, whether it grows in the friggin' garden, whether it's any of that stuff, you know. And I've had arguments in my past with my ex many years ago. It's like, well, you drink tea, that's a leaf. And I'm like, so maybe it is, right? So Marie said, is this the same as smoking fags? So the movement away of, like, you know, the depth of trauma with cigarettes, not as maybe distinct, but as an overall, it's like a shutdown. It's like a smoke screen. Not interested. It's like a blank. Yeah, it's more. So every drug's got a little bit of difference there. Okay, so what is the next that I wanted to work with here? So yeah, so that's so the link that you're talking about there, Alison, that's in the Clear and Activate pack. So if you go to my website, realityawareness.com, there's the Clear and Activate pack that you can download straight away. So you should be getting sent an email, then you can log into my members area and you'll find the Clear and Activate pack in there. So in there is specifically designed for empaths to be able to like clear, and it's not just chakra clearing, this is like next level empath clearing, because this is where, like, really stepping out of that like, you know how it's like all kind of piles onto you, this is like really shifting it. So it's a very different type of clearing. So go to realityawareness.com and you'll see it on that front page there, the Clear and Activate pack that you can download. And yeah, there's training videos in there. Please, please, please take time to watch them, because I explain how to use them and why we use them and why they're different to a normal chakra clearing. Yeah, so a lot of empaths find that the chakra clearing alone doesn't work, right? And I'll explain why in that pack. So make sure you go and download that. That's free. Okay, so all right, so yeah, so and it's interesting, right? Because the coach that I saw, like, you know, like promoting, like, you know, just sharing, like, where's all my weed people at or whatever, and I was like, whatever she said, and I was just like, wow, really? Like, so, you know, not long ago you're sharing about how you've got infertility problems and can't fall pregnant, but you're smoking weed. Like, you know, it's a no-brainer. I was sharing with my client, or we were having a conversation the other day, and I was saying to her, I was just like, you know, because she'd actually said it. She's like, it's just like common sense to me, like talking about a different subject. And I was like, yeah, and this is the thing, right? As a healer, we are in so much of like, that's just common sense. How can you not see that in a way, right? But that's where a healer comes into understanding of that is our gift, right? And for a lot of people, it might be common sense, right? But for people who are, I would think, are kind of like high up the scale in coaching and entrepreneur land, like teaching about this stuff, I'm like, how do you not know that? Like, I don't know, it's kind of weird to me. But at the same time, the biggest thing that I've had in my grief last night, I was like, man, I've been trying to fit a mold of a coach, and I am not a coach. I am a healer. And in that sense, I'm like, wow, like it's sort of a no-brainer, right? It's like, well, it's common sense. How do you're a healer? Like, you know, but I've been in these groups and like trying to fit these molds, and part of the breakdown of the past, like, you know, few weeks to a couple of months has been like, why isn't it working for me, or what's going on, or why don't I fit in, or what, like all the stories, right? I'm like, I don't resonate with this anymore, or like what, you know. And the biggest realization of that is that I'm a healer, I'm not a coach, and I've been trying to fit a mold that is that's not who I am, right? So in that whole thing around, you know, like the coaches, you know, I guess just sharing that, it's not that they're technically promoting it, but I guess they are in a way, and I'm just like, that's just not for me, right? So in that sense, I'm just going to check my notes, because there's important pieces of my unraveling of my realizations that I really want to share here. Okay, so the other part, you know, that I've kind of fallen from is putting my current coach on a pedestal, and you know, and me trying to figure it out, I was just like, man, she's not there to like fix your trauma, Hannah. She's not there to help you unravel that trauma. Like, that's not her skill set. And I was like, fuck, why did it take me this long to realize that? Anyway, I guess that's my gift and my skills, and that's what I've really, like, you know, seen and put all the pieces together. So the other piece of that is that I've always, like, I've got this thing lately that I feel needy. I feel needy, and I've been feeling very alone. And I've felt alone in the past, but at the same time, in the past maybe 2 years or something, it's been quite strong, and I've been trying to figure that out. And, you know, like, and there's so many pieces to this, right? So I'm just going to rattle these off. So in the past, you know, like in my party days, I was like the socialite. I was the one, like, I was the life of the party, right? And then when I stopped taking drugs, I was still the life of the party, because it's the music that does it for me, right? It's, you know, I still would go raving and I wouldn't be on anything because it's the music. If the music's right for me, I'm like front row nosebleed section, right? So music's got to be right though. So the music gets me high, let's say that. And so with this whole like piece with that, I've been kind of like trying to figure it out and looking over my life and just going like, you know, where did that stop, or where did that shift? And, you know, and she talks about the bad boys on that post, like I really resonated because that's all I've been with, right? And, you know, and I'm not somebody who's come from an easy place, you know, and this is where I think I've been putting too much expectation and pressure on myself to be good enough or be, you know, like them. And I'm like, man, when I see someone and I get triggered by, you know, their stories or their success or whatever it is, it's like, yeah, that's me not owning my light side of my shadow, you could say, in a way. But at the same time, I've really had to like step back and understand, where, you know, like when I've been trying to figure out, I'm like, why isn't this worked for me yet, or whatever. And there's so many business strategy aspects to that I've really got clear on as well. But the other piece to that is like, well, and this is what made me cry last night. So when I was dropping into the neediness, like I feel like I'm needy, like I feel like that's my energy, right? Because I've been trying to figure out what's wrong with me, that I don't have anyone around, that I haven't been able to hold a relationship, that I haven't been able to do that. And like all these like visions and flashbacks of like, you know, it was like going through like all my relationships in a way, right? It was like my ex of like, you know, when I had posted just before like December 2012. So in December 2012, I found out that my ex in 2012 broke up with me because he took a contract to go overseas and work. And that just ripped my heart out. And I was like, so that's the only reason you broke up with me? I was like, right, well, like the logistics of it were too hard. I had my daughter, I had all this stuff. And I was like, right, so I was gutted, right? And I was like, okay, so what am I doing here on the coast? And I was literally looking at like real estate in Perth on the other side of the country to go back home to where my family is. And then I met my other ex of, you know, like in January the next year, right? January that year. So I stayed. And that was like the 5 years of codependent mess of like all the back and forth and all the stuff. Now I've gone over those times so much in my head and so many times of unraveling, like why, you know, like why did that break up? Why did that happen? Why did that, you know, like why did that happen? Like, why did I meet him, right? And he promised the world to me, and I see that's all the narcissistic red flags. I get that now. Promised me the world, and then would always retreat as soon as we got any sort of level of commitment happening, and like going, you know, like becoming a proper couple or something. It was always like retreat, and then it was always my issues and my reactions and my problems. And I know a lot about narcissistic behavior and abuse, but I've been reading up on it a lot more just recently, actually. And it's like, you know, when, you know, you bring something to the table and then they turn around and say, no, that's your problem and that. And I cop so much of that. that's what made me sit in therapy for 3 years, because I was constantly told that it was my issue and my reactions and my problems. Now, whilst there's a definite key to that in the start, for sure, like, but I did 3 years of like solid counseling, psychotherapy, like deep stuff, like face-to-face stuff, like intense, 3 freaking years of it. Like, and I definitely grew and shifted from it. I know that. I know it's all meant to be, but there has been so many times that December 2012 was like a full life. Like, imagine if I'd gone to Perth, I would be living a completely different life right now, right? Who knows where I'd be, yeah? But last night it dropped into like flashback after flashback of all the times where he turned around and said, no, it's you. And I thought something was wrong with me. And so I did all this work, but every time I came back with having done the work, it was still me. It was still me and my issues and my problems, right? And I'm just like, and it was interesting because in the grief and the flashbacks, it was like, wow, this is all the trauma, I guess, I've been carrying from that relationship of like, it's you, it's you, it's you, it's your problem, it's your problem. Like, you know, it's like, it was intense. And then it dropped deeper, right? Because the other thing is, like, you've probably seen, I've been wanting to move house, or am I moving? And I know I'm at a 6-month point of being in this house, and that always happens at a 6-month point. And, you know, like I'd always moved around. Like I left home when I was 18, and I'd always moved around from, you know, like when I was 18, I left home, drove across Australia, lived on the other side of Australia ever since. All my family is interstate, right? And so I've been alone for a long time. And this is where I was unraveling the alone thread, yeah? And so the alone thread was dropping deeper and deeper into this unraveling, because it started with the home, right? So it started with this current home of not, like, you know, I don't really have much furniture, right? Like, we've got the essentials. We've got beds, we've got office, we've got desks, we've got gaming computers, but that's the like most important thing, right? And, you know, and kitchen table, and like, that's it, you know. And I'm somebody who can't do secondhand furniture. I just can't. Like, the energy, I'm too sensitive for it. Like, I just choose not to. So I'd rather go without than have secondhand furniture. Now, everyone will say that's a choice, and I'm like, yeah, it is a choice, right? And the furniture that I want, like, you know, a decent couch is like 2.5, 3K, right? Like, you know, it's a fair chunk. And I'm like, man, we just had all these animals. So anyway, there's all these reasons, right? The other reason is I'm like, oh, okay, are we moving now? So I don't need to get furniture now because it's going to set up this house, right? And I'm like, okay, if we're going to move, I don't need, like, it's just all this stuff. And I'm like, whoa, like, what's going on here? Like, hang on a sec. Stop. And then, so the home thing, if you guys have been following me, you know my home story. And like, I don't know where we're living, find my home. And then we found this place and the whole story about it. The alone thing. And so I just need to share. So when I left home at 18, got here, been in Queensland for, what was it, 16, 17 years now, on my own, had my daughter on my own, blah, blah, blah. I would move house every 2 years. Like, it wouldn't be longer than 2 years, and I'd be moving 2 years, 2 years, 2 years. At my last place where I was there for 8 years. I broke something in that pattern. I knew I was breaking, and I faced so much stuff in that house because I broke that 2-year moving pattern. And so I was conscious of all the patterns with this move stuff coming up. Now, in that place, like, I did have a couch, but my ex had bought it for me years and years ago, my daughter's father. And when we broke up, sorry, it's really hot here. When we broke up, I was like, get all this energy out of my house. So I got rid of the couch, and we haven't had a couch since now. And that's fine, but at times I'm like, man, I just want to sit down. I just want to sit down. And I'm at that point where I'm like, I'm tired of the house not being a house, not being a home, right? And so all this home stuff and all the alone stuff. And I'm like, why am I always alone? Like, why haven't I been with somebody, you know? And I know that I've been through all these codependent bad boy relationships, and I've been working on that. And then the past 2 years, it's like been like really consciously stepping out of that. The people that I have been drawn to are technically those people. And I'm like, well, that's interesting because it's still there, but I'm really alone. And I'm like, okay, something's shifting. Like, this is the big, like, this is the core shift. So, with the home stuff, and what dropped in last night is that I've always been alone. And you know, I've had boyfriends over the years, but we've never lived together. It's always been in my place. It's always been in my name. I've never actually lived with a boyfriend. I've never actually freaking never experienced that. I'm like, wow, like, you know, and I've been contemplating that. I'm like, what? And, you know, with the other, you know, people I see their success stories or whatever, I'm like, you know, like, you've got a loving, supporting partner. You haven't been a single mum for 11, 12 years, you know, like you haven't been through a domestic violence situation when you were pregnant. Like, you know, and I'm not saying that everyone needs to, I'm just like in myself noticing the difference of life and stop comparing yourself, Hannah. Like, you know, like this is where that was really kind of coming from. It's just like, Hannah, like just take a check. Like, they do not understand what you have been through, and, you know, to try and make somebody understand, and it's not that in a way, right? So it's really kind of interesting that this is really coming up, like obviously opening and shifting something to be in that, whatever. So the big piece about the home, it was core, like it was deep grief, like puffy eyes this morning that I haven't cried that deeply. Like I know I hit core stuff. So when I left home at 18, like I was the oldest, I am the oldest of 3 younger siblings, and have youngest of 3 younger siblings. And growing up, there was a reason between 13 and 18, 21, that I would smoke weed heavily every day, because I was avoiding my reality. That's pretty much what it is. It was a coping mechanism for the environment that I was in as a teenager. Like that's what it was. And so I see that, you know, I was like, oh, that's why I'm so triggered seeing coaches, well-known, a lot of people, coaches, like follow coaches that promote weed. I get super triggered on that because I'm so passionate about teaching people to cultivate that connection to spirit at that level without drugs. That's what I'm passionate about. That's what I do. That's why I do what I do. Like, and that's why I was like processing all this. I'm like, honey, you're not a coach, you're a healer. Like, and this is what I'm so passionate about, because I used to be that raver who would stay up for like a week straight on ice and then like fall over and then get up the next day and do it all over again. Like I've lived that lifestyle, and it was a coping mechanism for everything that I went through, that started when I was sexually abused, and I told the family member of that abuse, and they told me to never speak of it again, and then I got abused by them. Like, you know, like that's where it started. And so no wonder I smoked heavily from 13, smoked cigarettes from 13, you know, like all the way through high school. Like no wonder I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to school like an hour early, like to speak to this teacher like every day. Yeah, I was like going to the bush to meet my friends, to smoke bongs before school. Like that was what I did. Like it was a coping mechanism. And so that whole thing about the home, when I left home at 18 and traveled across Australia, as soon as I left, my brother moved into my room, and then the kids had more space in the house, so they each had a room each. So all of a sudden, my room's not there. I must have known though, because when I left, I packed up every single item I owned, all my treasures at an 18-year-old, and I got them shipped over. Like, I must have known, but it was kind of interesting. I'm laughing about it now, but frickin' wasn't last night, I tell you what. So when I came over here, the partner, because I drove over, we went for a drive, like me and my boyfriend at the time, and we drove over, and it was an awesome time. We were high, we were freaking on speed the whole time, driving. We just drive, and smoke weed and all sorts, right? And so the realization of this whole home thing, and I don't think it's been a conscious avoidance of it. There's been other factors. I'm like, man, I've raised my daughter on my own. I haven't had you know, like anybody. I don't even, like my family interstate, we don't have family gatherings. We don't have coffees with parents. We don't do that shit. I've never done that shit. I didn't even have a baby shower. Like I've done so much on my own. And, you know, I thought something was wrong with me because of that. And this has been a big part of the process around trying to understand where I'm at now and trying to, you know, like make this business work or whatever. Like I've done well. I've taken myself off government benefits. I've supported myself for 2 years and my daughter, like through my business, like something must be working. But I've stepped out of that mother role to my clients and to my followers. I'm changing. I can't sustain that. I don't want to be that mother role anymore. I'm a healer. Like I'll help you to heal yourself. I don't heal you. I don't hold space for you to do that. But in a capacity that's, you know, sustainable for me, and by following my vision of what reality awareness has always been to me since 2005 when it first came, or 2006 technically, when that vision first come to me. And I feel like I've gone a bit off path from that vision, trying to be a coach, trying to be, I don't know, I knew I needed mentoring, right, and coaching, but I got lost in it. And this whole big piece around like stepping out of this role that I'm not that role. I'm not that mother role. It's interesting, right? Like I haven't had that around me. And, you know, and the big part of the cry that hit core was I didn't even realize until last night that I couldn't go home. Like, you know, mum would say over the times when I'd be upset or whatever, she's like, come home. And I'm like, no. Like from probably many other reasons, but you know, at the same time I'm like, I didn't even have my bedroom to go back to. Like it was gone. And not only that, like we lived in a, you know, it was like in the suburbs, normal house, but you know, all I really remember is the bathroom being a disarray and broken tiles and broken shower glass stuff. Like that was just normal. And as soon as I moved out, they renovated the whole freaking house. And so it wasn't even, it's not that I wanted to go back to the broken glass bathroom, but you know, it was just broken drawers and shit. Like, you know, it's not that, but the fact that I didn't have a home. So this whole journey of trying to find a home is deep. It's so deep. And I think that, you know, part of the furniture thing is like, oh, if I set up and get a home, then I'm going to leave, or then I'm going to get kicked out, or then it's all going to change, or then I will lose it or something. Like, do you know what I mean? Like there's something, I haven't quite hit that bit yet. But that's, you know, that's what, there's something there. I haven't got to that bit yet. You know, and I know there's something there with that, because this has made so much sense. I'm like, wow. And I feel like I've just been wandering and lost. And that's why my home for so long, like, I'm like, I don't know. And that's why we went on those road trips last night, because, you know, like last year, because I'm like, okay, like find our home. Where are we supposed to live? I don't know. Like, you know, so big. It's so big. So I guess I want to share that. And there was another piece that I wanted to share that. So I'm just checking my notes. I can't even read what I was trying to write there. Obviously, I'm pretty sure I covered everything though. Yeah. So, you know, like my whole life has been a coping mechanism up until now. Like, that's pretty big and deep what I've realized, like especially about the home thing and wanting to save the world, but not even sorting out my home. Like, you know, number one, well, I need like, you know, good chunk of money to set it up the way I want. And that's why I've always been like, no, I'm waiting, you know, like it's always been my thing. At the same time, I'm at that point where I'm like, oh, I'm so tired of this, right? I just want to sit down. And so obviously I'm ready and something's shifting, but all that core underneath stemming from being triggered by like coaches promoting like weed and stuff, I'm like, man, nah, it's not for me. It's not for me. Cultivate that connection, you know. And this is the thing where once I had my spiritual awakening and was able to, you know, like realize that without the drugs, I can have that level of connection. You know, like the ayahuasca thing has always been in and out for me. You know, I know my mentor, and I know a lot of people take the ceremonies and stuff like that. And, you know, if I've always thought if I'm ever going to do it, yeah, I am going to do it like deep in the jungles of Peru with the shamans and stuff like that. But at the same time, I've gone in and out with it. Now people have told me, oh, that's how she speaks to you and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know, like every time I'm coming, I'm like, nah, like, you know, because I'd questioned it and I'd researched a bit, and different people's stories are like, oh, I like walked back into the group and like everything was multi-dimensional kind of space, and I'm like, oh, that's like my everyday reality. Like, don't you walk outside and see all the different realms in front of you? Like, isn't that normal? And I'm like, no, it's not normal for people, because you're a healer, you're not a coach. You are a healer and you have a gift. And this is what you do. And coming into that realization is like, wow, I've come home. I've come home. So that's all about that. Friggin' huge. Huge. Massive. Right, let me check these comments. If you guys need support on this, because this is a huge unravel. This is massive, and this is a game changer for me. This shifts everything for me. No wonder I've been depressed for 2 years, 2.5 years, more. Like, you're not that person. You're you, of course. No brainer. But when we're full of all that stuff, and we're on a different path to a lot of other people, and we see all these other people, it's very easy to compare yourself and forget the gift that you are, and forget the gift of what you've been through to get where you are. Like, that's huge. It's massive. So massive. Oh, I'm sorry. It is a sad story. It is. And that's the thing. Like, you know, people are like, don't cry, just be happy and smoke weed and let's take another ceremony and everything's fine. And I'm like, man, that's such a disconnect to reality. I'm like, yeah, we can feel joy and we can feel happiness, but like, I would rather face these emotions head on than take something to help me process it unconsciously and then come back to reality and skip the whole connection pieces. I don't know, I just know what I'd rather choose, right? And I know that people can cultivate that connection, because this is a big thing of like me coming off drugs, and I'm like, man, I don't need drugs. I don't need drugs. Like, you know, after I stopped smoking weed, like it wasn't like I just stopped. I remember it so clearly in my apartment on Alexander Headlands in the Sunshine Coast that looked out to the ocean. It was friggin' amazing. I said I'd never move from that place. I was there for 2 years. How about that? And, you know, I remember stopping smoking weed, and it was like, because I used to smoke bongs every day, like just every day, morning, lunch, breakfast, like whatever, dinner, whatever. And, you know, like after a while I stopped smoking every day and I just smoked on the weekends. It wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to smoke on the weekends. It just naturally happened, right? I just didn't smoke during the week, and so I just smoked on the weekends. And then after like 6 months, and you know, and it was the festival season in summer, that, you know, and it was after that kind of festival season, I was just like, oh, I don't need to take this stuff anymore. It was May 2006, I remember so clearly. Oopsies, I just pressed something wrong. Okay, all right. Oh my gosh, stop. It's not letting me, oh no, it's not letting me scroll up anymore. Okay, let me just try. Oh my gosh, don't press anything. Okay, don't touch it. Feel it to heal it. Yeah, like for me, it's the conscious, you know, it's the conscious understanding of it. It's the conscious connection of all the pieces put together, not like a thing, but that's the thing, like I'm a healer. Not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody wants to, you know, be conscious of all the bits and pieces, but that fascinates me, and I freaking love that stuff. I love putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. I love unraveling it consciously, you know, like that's the biggest piece for me. I love it. I love it. And I don't know why this is not, oh my God. Okay, I'm just going to bring it up on my other phone because it's not letting me see the comments. All right. So do you guys have any questions about anything that I've shared there? Here we go. So there's other comments here. Sorry. So Brad said, I think she said people who use cannabis for medicine regularly are not able or worthy to engage properly. Did I get that right? No, that's not what I said. It's interesting, cannabis for medicine, you know, like if you hear my story about that, it's like, you know, not able or worthy to engage properly, like definitely not. Like worthiness is completely separate from that, I do believe. That's an inside job. But when you said like cannabis for medicine regularly, I mean, like you could see that I technically was smoking cannabis for medicine from the age of 13 to 21. Like what do you label as medicine of what is it? You know, like define, that's the word I'm looking for. Define what pain is. Define what pain is. Define what you need medicine for, right? Now, when you say that, you know, cannabis for medicine, it's like when you look at, I'm probably going to lose a lot of followers from this live stream. It's awesome because I'm clearing out my field. You know, like when you look at people who smoke weed for medicine for pain, like physical pain, well, physical pain starts with emotional pain. And if you don't deal with the emotions that stem right back from all the issues throughout your whole life, then those issues, right, are not going to, like, they're going to create physical pain in your body because you haven't dealt with them. And so smoking weed for pain medicine is exactly the same of what I've just been talking about. It moves that away from your body, but as soon as you're not stoned anymore, well, then it's straight back there and you're like, what? Can't deal with this, quick, let me smoke it again. And so the cycle perpetuates, and you need it to continue the pain medication. You could look at cannabis and any pain medication as a pharmaceutical medication. Like, it's the same. It's exactly the same. You're just covering up the reason that it's there. It doesn't heal it, or you wouldn't need to take it all the time. Chantel says, cannabis has been used in many cultures for many years. It is a high vibrational medicine. I differ to agree with that. It is healing many people today as we've claimed it back after it was taken from us. The intention that it was created when one smokes it is the key. A healer who understands this will be able to guide someone through it. A healer who understands the level of trauma that we're dealing with can help them heal it consciously without any journeying medicine, right? Without any substance. That's what I am about. The intention, often people get paranoia. That is the plant's vibration bringing to the surface what is underlying the fear. I beg to differ. It is not about entities coming in. I beg to differ. They are already there. Imprinted at the time of trauma. Trauma resides in the DNA also. So we are born with it. Yeah. Cannabis helps us vibrationally interrupt and brings it to the surface. I beg to differ. It takes someone who truly understands this through experience and formulates an embodied process to be of utmost benefit. But that's the thing, like as a healer, why would you need a substance to allow your client to be able to journey through to heal that? Like as a healer, I am able to do that with the person without any substance. Now, for a long-term healing benefit, you want to teach your clients to be able to do that so they're not relying on you and they're not relying on your substance of cannabis to continue that healing. We all have our opinions and entitled to them. Interesting. What works for some doesn't work for others. We're here to guide each other home by the heart being open to all different healing modems. Yeah. That's why I'm sharing this, that I don't resonate with it. I really don't. I do not resonate with healing through taking a substance. It's an avoidance mechanism. No, you can't walk over that way. You're not allowed over. Go and sit down. You can't walk over that way. All right, it's gonna bring up these comments because I can't touch my phone now. No, you're gonna knock the light over. You're gonna knock the light over. The light and the stand. Okay, check these comments. Right. So Marie says, big realization listening to your story. I just realized I was kind of the mum for my mum growing up. She was depressed. Yeah, exactly. Hearing that and tried to overdose a few occasions. I witnessed this growing up, and she was never there for me when I truly needed her. You had to grow up quickly. Yeah, exactly right. Healing without any external factors. Yes. Yes, Josephine says you were the catalyst for their healing. They must have realized or something clicked when you left. Yes. Elena says, I feel you. I have experienced the same. Doreen's, I completely relate. Yes. Paula's the same as well. Yes. Hi, Andy from Germany. Amazing. All right. So I'm just going to check the other group as well for comments, because I know it's a very triggering conversation and I got very triggered about it. And look what I processed without drugs. That's amazing, right? No, I'm just saying. I'm just passionate about helping to people to cultivate that level of connection, right? Because would you agree, when people take that, and the reason they do is because their level of connection is more open, because all the crap isn't there. Well, how about we learn to cultivate that connection, that level of connection with the crap there, because then on a day-to-day basis, we don't need to go into ceremony and go on this big travel to get somewhere to heal. It's man, we can just do it real time right now without any substance, without any need for something, right? Because we've learned to cultivate that connection and being able to process all those levels of connections without the thing that makes us open to do that. That level of openness and your connection should be able to be cultivated naturally, and that is the reality. When you really look back through the human history, way back in time, we were these very connected empath beings that were just so connected. I didn't take drugs all the way back then. That's the level of connection and cultivation that we need to muster and return to without any need for any outside substance at all. We should be able to journey that through ourselves, and that level of connection can be sustained without needing anything. 100%. Healing without substance is core healing at the root, not using band-aids. Exactly. And without the side effects after them. Exactly, right? And this is the thing where they're oh yes, I healed that thing, but hang on, all this other stuff's back in reality, so let me keep going again. Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know. Oh my goodness, I can't touch that screen. Don't know why it's doing that. Whatever. Don't touch it. All right, let's go and check this last comment on here because I couldn't touch the screen. Oh, I still got puffy eyes. And this is a thing where, I always say about crying heals so much, but people don't allow themselves to go there. That level of traveling through the grief is what heals stuff, but a lot of people don't let themselves go there. They need something to open it for them, and so they've skipped the heart, and this is where the healing and the feeling is, right? We take something, we're open up here, but we're still cut off to where it's sitting in the heart. Right? I feel so strongly about that. I'm so freaking passionate about that. Yeah. Okay. All right. I covered all the comments. So if you're watching the replay, let me know. And if you think that this can help somebody and it resonates with you, please share it, and share it far and wide, because I am so passionate about this, that people, can cultivate that level of connection and conscious understanding through healing without any substance, without any need for that, right? Imagine if we didn't have that need in society. It'd be different, right? It would be different. So if you need support with that, like I said, my 21-day shifter program, you can go to realityawareness.com, and if you scroll down, there's work with Hannah. there's different options, but the 21-day shifter program is a beautiful little space where we can really shift stuff, because you know, step into my energetic field and we really work deep on the core that travels down. And the other thing as well with a healer or a coach is kind of like, unless they've gone deep into the deep crevices of their subconscious, consciously, you know, if they skipped it and gone open and then they're closed and they're still missing that like solid connection here, like, yeah, really passionate about it. Hence why I came on and talked about it very vulnerably. So I'm so glad I did, though, because I'm a healer, not a coach. What a friggin' realization. Oh my God. Game changer. All right. I shall see you soon. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe, and to like my page Reality Awareness, so that you get all the updates and all the latest goss and news that's going on in the world and intuitively in your conscious awareness and on the globe. And if you're not in my Reality Awareness support group, every Tuesday, which is on Facebook, so every Tuesday I do the Intuitive Healing Tuesdays, which I can give free intuitive healing advice and see what's going on intuitively and unpick those cores. We've had some powerful shifts in that group since I've started doing that. So you can type into the Facebook search bar the Reality Awareness support group, or send me a message and I can send you the link. Yes, thank you guys for being here. I love you guys heaps. I shall see you soon. Mwah. Bye.